Hi, how's it going? My name's Austin Silver, and this is the first episode of Overlooked. It's a podcast about stand up comedy and improving in the stand up world and the exercises and steps that I'm trying to take to become a stand up comic who's doing it for a living. I've been doing it for 13 years with some success, I guess. I've gotten paid before. I've gone touring. I have an hour. I have an album recorded that I'm waiting to release. I've done a lot of things. I made finals in Funniest Person in Austin. I live in Austin, Texas, by the way. This podcast is to just kind of keep me accountable and keep me pushing forward. And if any of the stuff that you see in here helps you, then feel free to leave a comment and let me know how you're doing. I want to check back in. I want to set goals for myself every week for what I'm going to do to improve my career. And if you want to follow along, then by all means. So I'm going to be checking in with you every week. I'm trying to do one new aspect of comedy each week, both the art and the business, and I'll explain what I mean in just a minute. And then I'll just like talk about my week and tell you about some comedy stories. I don't do this full time. The first topic I want to talk about is just getting booked, and these are my opinions. It doesn't mean I'm right. I think I'm right, otherwise it wouldn't be my opinion. But if you guys have any thoughts, feel free to comment. Whatever. Like it's a community. Okay, so to me, I prepared a list of ways to get booked. What do you think about that? The first one is obvious. Just be funny, writing more, performing more, getting more stage time. All that stuff leads to you improving as a comic. So I think that's a pretty obvious one. One note on being a good comic. I do think that the Austin scene has changed since the Joe Rogan Kill Tony era. There's a lot more comedians, there's a lot more shows, there's a lot more showcases, and I am of the opinion that it is harder to get noticed now than it used to be doing open mics. I feel that there are a lot of producers in the scene that are just doing showcases, right? Like, obviously, if you're a regular at any of the clubs, then you don't really have to do open mics. And why would you? For the same time frame, if you could do 10 minutes as opposed to 3 or 4 or 5 minutes and also in front of an audience, there's no reason for you not to do that. So that's definitely a thing I notice. And maybe that means go to less open mics. Maybe that's what it means. For me, it is. I mean, I feel like I'm a little bit over open mics, rightly or wrongly. That's how I feel. I do think that I would rather like hang out and try to get my friends to introduce me to people who are producing stuff as opposed to just like hoping that they notice you at a mic. I do think that's a big difference from when I started back in 2012 to now. That feels markedly different to me. So definitely hanging out. So those are the things that I want to do. Is I want to hang out more. Yeah, another thing that I would say helps a lot, and this kind of goes back to that point, is if you run a show, and if you run a show that's worth doing, and people want to get on your show, then maybe you could trade spots. I think there is some like implied quid pro quo stuff happening, and I just got on a show that got canceled. I got on a show because, not because, but I booked him a couple of weeks ago, and then I ran into him at another show, and he put me on his. It could just mean that I'm a good comedian, but I think that it kind of points to I'm booking him and also he's seeing me out, so I'm at the top of his mind. I do think that be around is the second one. I think that that's an underrated thing. I lived in Atlanta. I started in Austin, Texas. Then I moved to Atlanta. And I remember just going to a showcase and I had met a couple of people there and they brought me to the showcase and I met the producer and I was talking to him for a little bit and I was like, this is a really cool show. He's like, oh yeah, you want to do it next week? Yeah, that'd be great. And it's not always that easy, but sometimes it is. Sometimes you just have to go hang out at the places and go support people's shows. Like that really is the most important thing that you can do as a comic as far as like they call it supporting for a reason, right? That's a very unselfish thing for you to like go and go to someone's show and hang out in the audience and you don't have to stay the whole time, but like, definitely hang out for a little while and like it's tough to be in the crowd, but like if you're there, people notice for sure. When people come to my shows, I notice absolutely. And I do know producers who have said that they won't book anyone who doesn't come to support their show. I've been booked by people who just looked up and said, "Oh, hey, are you available next week?" That's happened. That's happened a couple of times. And like I said, just going to shows, being around, people seeing your face, because there's a ton of comics. There's a ton of comics in the scene, and sometimes it's hard. And people are going to book their friends, and they're going to book the people that they remember. Okay, this is what I want to say about hanging out. And this is a mistake that I definitely made like early, is that like nobody owes you anything. I think that's the hardest thing to learn as a stand-up, is that like maybe you are better than the people who are getting spots. Maybe they got it because it was their friend. Maybe I don't know. I genuinely don't know. You can't feel like they owe you stuff. The minute you start feeling that, you're going to get bitter and you're going to start like being obnoxious and like you're making decisions for selfish reasons as opposed to like, I don't know. Like if you go to hang out at a place, yeah, you are there to get noticed, but also like be hanging out. Like meet people, like be genuinely interested in people and what they have going on. Like, I don't know. I think that's a thing that I've struggled with in the past is like, just like, hey, what's up? I'm here, right? So like you owe me something. And that's just not how it works. So just keep that in mind, is like, don't expect anything. You know what I mean? If you're going to hang out, then you went to support and let that be enough. So just use caution. And this is me saying that because I've been there before. I've been that person. I've been bitter. I'm currently bitter and I'm trying to like get better about it and just like be happy for people, because you being upset isn't going to change anyone's circumstances. It's not going to change yours. It's not going to change theirs. Just because you're upset means that they're not going to get the show anymore. Just because you're upset means that they're not going to be friends with the bookers. Like, it won't. Like, nobody owes you anything. And I think that that's like a very hard lesson to learn. Maybe it's just me, but like, just keep that in mind as you're meeting people. I don't know. Like, don't have ulterior motives. Like, you're going to check it out. You're going to meet people for the possibility of getting booked on their show later. But like, that's not the only reason. Sometimes it's just cool to meet other comics and talk with them and like hear what they have to say about any aspect of this business. You can learn from everybody. Have a social media presence. I've had people hit me up and I am definitely more inclined to book them if they have a lot of followers. Does it mean that they're going to bring people out? No, it doesn't. It absolutely doesn't. But I'd rather book someone who has 10,000 followers than someone who has 500 followers, all things being equal. I've recommended a guy who I just ran into one of their reels on Instagram, and I was like, this guy is freaking hilarious. And I recommended him to be on another show. Yes, I knew there was something else I wanted to touch on when I was talking about social media. Yes, I did book or referred someone who I didn't know because I saw his video on social media. But that's not the only thing that you can use social media for. Besides having a ton of followers and trying to convince people that you're going to get anyone out, you're not. The other thing that you can do is if I meet someone, then I probably exchange social media with them. And you know what? Every once in a while, I go back and I look at their videos. And if they have videos where they're being funny, I will ask them to do my show because that's the quickest way, right? When you hit someone up to do a show, you should always send them a video. But like also sometimes I'm going to go look at your feed and like see what you got. And that's a great way. So someone can stumble upon it, or once again, if you meet someone and you give them your social media, they can check it out independently and be like, this guy's great. Something to think about. You know, I was editing this podcast and I was like, oh yeah, I didn't talk about running your own show. Running your own show is a fantastic way to make sure that you get stage time. First of all, you can always book yourself. You'll never say no to you. So that's pretty cool. And then the other thing about it is that you can kind of trade shows with people. It doesn't mean that you'll always get that. Just because you book someone on your show doesn't mean that they will automatically book you on theirs. But it definitely raises the probability that you will get booked on other people's shows. And maybe sometimes people will book you on their show when they're trying to get on yours. One of my best pieces of advice is to have a show that people want to be on. That is fantastic and valuable currency in this industry. I have a friend in LA who runs several successful shows and people book him all the time. And maybe sometimes it's because they want to be on his show. So think about that. Also, sometimes you could just hit people up. Sometimes you could just ask. I've probably the first 5 years of my career, I would say that half the shows that I was on were just like me asking. And people were like, yeah, all right. I think some producers feel bothered if you do it. You know, the best way to do is to feel them out. But if they seem like open to you, if you see them like out and about, like, I don't know, hit them up. Maybe hit them up on Instagram, send them a message. I think that probably you shouldn't ask in person unless you know the person really well. I definitely remember like like having a good conversation with someone and then being like, so can I do your show? And they just like shut down immediately. And I was like, yeah, there's something to playing it cool, just like a little bit. But yeah, asking is always viable. And I know some people who will never ask because they're like, if they don't want me on the show, I don't want to do it. Like, all right, man, whatever. I went over it and I want to add a couple of things to asking to be on people's shows. The other thing is like, don't be afraid to travel. And I think it's actually an advantage if you travel because show producers in other towns want to book people from out of town. And it's really nice when someone comes from out of town and it's a fresh face and you can bill them as such. The other thing is like, as an Austin comic, if you're based in Austin, there is a certain cachet now with the Austin comedy scene, rightly or wrongly. And I think that there is like precedent for you to be booked. I think that Austin is becoming more known for its comedy, certainly more than when I started out as like a comedy hotspot where people might be good. Also, probably people think that Austin comics all deliver material in a certain way and that kind of stuff. But, you know, it's definitely worth a try. Don't be afraid to travel. I've been booked a couple of times as my friend's feature. It's good. You know, you're hoping that your headliner is making thousands of dollars so they can give you 1,000 or whatever. So I think that the economics of how much they're earning is going to affect your ability to travel with them, your ability to make money. But I do know a guy who lives here and he's never home because he's always on the road with a headliner. I don't know too much about that kind of stuff, but that's definitely another option. So those are my keys to getting booked. Once again, this is just my opinion, but be good, be around, have a good social media presence, run your own show, just ask, and travel with a headliner. And also, this podcast is brought to you by Quack's Bakery. Meet me at Quack's with 3 locations in the Austin area, one in Hyde Park, one in the Mueller Development, and one south at Stasny and Manchaca, where I host my show. So, what do you think about that? Great scratch-made pastries, also coffee drinks, and also at the south location, there is a stage and a performance center space with a full bar over there. So check them out. There's one near you. So to this end, what am I going to work on for me to get booked more? Like I said, I'm going to practice what I preach. I am going to go to more shows, hanging out, and I run a couple of shows. My goal is to make my shows something that people want to be in. So then I have that leverage. That's all my advice, and that's the stuff that I'm going to work on. So what are my goals for next week? Okay. My goal is to go to 3 showcases with producers that I haven't met yet and hang out and meet all the people that are getting booked regularly. That's one of my goals. My second goal is to start making the show that I host, like I said, a place that everybody wants to come perform at. So that means I'm going to start the process of social media advertising and trying to see what else I can come up with to get more people in the door. So those are the things that I'm going to work on for next week. So I'll see you next week, and we'll compare notes, and we'll see what we can get up to. I do want to make like an adjustment every week in how I'm living the rest of my life without stand up to just have like my life more on track so I can focus more on the stuff that I care about. So for me, this week is going to be working out. I worked out for the first time tonight in a while. I do have a gym at my apartment, so no more excuses. And I think I'm going to be trying to work out 3 days a week. There's a ton of other stuff. And like I said, each week I'm going to talk about a specific element. I think I'm going to talk about writing next week, about like scheduling the time or whatever. What's some interesting stuff I did in the last week? Well, November was interesting because someone on Reddit posted Jokevember, and what they did was they put a prompt up every single day for everybody participating to write a joke about every day and post it on Reddit, which I thought was really neat. And it was nice because I don't write every day. I wish I did, but I don't. But it was nice to have that prompt every day, just to have one thing. Even if you got nothing else, then you could like at least start writing. And there were times where I had to do 2 or 3 prompts at a time because I fell behind, and also doing it on Reddit felt a little bit limiting because when you're looking at all the threads, your entry is like this big, so you feel kind of just like unspoken pressure to make it more like jokey jokes and one-liners. So if you're a storyteller, it was like harder, but I posted a bunch of stuff, and some stuff I was proud of, like 3 or 4 things I was proud of, and all the rest of the 30 days was like not very good. But it was interesting because it gave me like germs of ideas, and I definitely want to maybe give it a couple of weeks and then go back to those jokes that I wrote for that thing and like see if they inspire anything, a spoken word joke as opposed to just like a one-liner. But that was really cool, and I think that was a good, like I said, it was a good thing if you don't have anything in your mind at all for what you want to write about, or like no goals, no jokes, no premises in mind. Then it was nice to have like a prompt that would like center your thing. The ominousness of a blank page is very threatening, I guess. So it was nice to like I said, have a thing. You go to sit down and you just like, there's nothing I want to work on. I don't have any premises. You know, that's what it's nice to just like, oh, okay, here's a subject. So just like think about the subject. So that's the thing that I'm going to explore later, and maybe I'll talk about that more in our writing thing next week. I want to add one more thing. This is just going to be like a special segment. I'm going to add a thing called Tales from the Bucket. I have a tip bucket that I've carried around to every show that I've produced, and I have a bunch of stickers on it from the venues that I went to. So I'm going to pick a sticker, maybe not every week, but every once in a while, and tell a story about what happened at that venue. So without further ado, Tales from the Bucket. Today we're going to Phoenix to Helio Basin Brewing. This was on my long tour in 2018. I think all these stickers are from 4 or 5 different solo tours, but Helio Basin was in Phoenix. Also, I want to point out that like if you're hitting people up for spots at their breweries and trying to produce a show, 80% of the time they're not even going to look at your tape. So bear that in mind when you go. Helio Basin, I had been using someone who I found on Facebook to help me with marketing. And I'm not going to say his name because I think he did a good job, but we just weren't getting conversions at all. Like a ton of people would see the ad. It cost very little per ad. It was like 5 cents, but I think neither of us, I mean, I didn't know. And he was getting paid he's $20 an hour. So every time he did a campaign, it was like $50, which I think was a good deal, but we just couldn't close the deal. He lived in Phoenix and we're doing all this advertising, and the day of, I've sold 4 tickets. Who did I sell those 4 tickets to? Him, his girlfriend, his friend, and his girlfriend. So the day of the show, it's a crowd of 4 people. There are 3 comedians performing. And I think, they did like 10, 10, 30, like I did 30 minutes. And it was so funny because I'm performing for the guy, solely for the guy who's supposed to help me sell out this thing. So it was kind of a situation where it's like, oh my God, thanks for coming. Would you say offhand that your marketing efforts were successful? I guess not. But I think Helio Basin is closed. I'm not sure. They're very nice to let us have it. The advertising didn't do a thing. I couldn't get anyone. Sometimes you go and bark at the regulars and see if they'll come and come into the show. That happens so seldom. But I did. I was asking all these people, hey, you want to see comedy? What, are you funny? Yeah, man, I'm funny. But we did the show without incident. That was very nice of them to sit for the whole thing. But also it was very funny to be like, hey, thanks for helping me advertise.